he sits here and says he was a terrible coach, and he also tells us he was a terrible basketball player. If he was as terrible of a basketball player as he thinks he is as terrible of a coach, this man's probably in a Hall of Fame somewhere. But I mean, it's really an amazing story to be able to, for him, basically do the unthinkable. I mean, this was a guy that used to just, the way he got on the coaching staff was he sat and watched practice and used to take his own stats and notes about the team from way up in Carmichael Arena. And he got called down one day by Coach Smith. Coach Smith basically asked him, "Son, what are you doing up there?" Well, I mean, this is a closed practice, whatever. And saw what Roy was doing, put him on the staff, and he got to learn from his idol, and then eventually not only learn from his idol, get a job as a head coach because of his idol, eventually circled back around to coach against his idol in the Final Four and beat him in the Final Four. I mean, it's just, it's a surreal experience. And then basically, look, you had Bill Guthridge, you had Matt Doherty. I think in a lot of people's minds, Roy Williams basically took over for Dean Smith in most respects. That's how, I mean, the history books will, of course, have Matt Doherty's name in it as well as Bill Guthridge. But in a lot of people's minds, the transition was Dean to Roy with a little bit in between. And I think just because of everything that you saw of the way that he sort of continued what Dean did, but had little adjustments that he made. It's very similar to what's going to happen with Hubert taking over for him. That's what it was. And I mean, you could see the impact that he's had on these other coaches. I mean, you talk about the kids. I mean, we listened to Hubert's introductory press conference yesterday. He talked the same way about Roy Williams that Roy talked about Dean. I told you when we were watching the documentary series All Access, they played a few of those again the other night. And again, I will never watch those over again because I am 100% convinced that is the reason why they struggled last year, was because they had documentary crews on campus. Never again. But we heard Sean May talked about him the same way. I mean, there are countless guys outside of the jackass Larry Drew who, I mean, he affected just about every one of their lives. I mean, you're talking about a guy that, even though some people are pointing the finger at him saying he was the reason that Walker Kessler left, Walker Kessler took to social media and posted a long paragraph about Coach Williams. Like, no matter who it is, he always seems to have an effect. This man, after his retirement press conference, he could have walked into the sunset with his wife and said, "Look, I'm done with this. Moving on. We're going home. We're doing what we want from here on out." What did he do after his retirement press conference? He went outside and signed plenty of autographs, took plenty of pictures, everything like that with the fans, because it's just who he is. I mean, that's the thing that is just different about Roy Williams than I think a lot of these other coaches. I don't know if Coach K will do that when he retires. Couldn't tell you. I don't know if Coach Calipari will do that when he retires. I just don't know. But I'm going to tell you one thing. If they had to go through what Roy had to go through in terms of what he had seen on social media from his own fan base, there's no way in hell that they would be going out there and doing that. But Roy puts it aside and just, he knows that there are people that love him and revere him. The only thing that I wish about Roy Williams, I wish this for him in retirement. Don't be as hard on yourself, because I wish he was a little less humble to a certain extent. I get, like, everybody loves the humble guy. It's all great. But I think at times he doesn't give himself enough credit for just how great of a job he did, how great of a job he did putting this program back in the direction that it needed to go after it was admittedly heading in the wrong direction. And it's a shame because this guy, I think in a lot of people's minds, people talk about him being underrated here. I'm with Dickie V on this one. And people give him a lot of slack in the Carolina fan base. This guy has him on the Mount Rushmore of coaches all time. I don't see how you can't put him on there.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do it today because it's not the appropriate time. Adam Lucas echoes the sentiment. He's the greatest basketball coach Carolina's ever had.
Yeah, that's a midsummer podcast that will take about 2.5, 3 hours to sort out.
He never wants to give himself the pound back for the job he did. I'll do it for you. 903 wins, third most all time. Fourth, if you count what Jim Calhoun's doing at Division II. I don't count that. So we've got the third most Division I wins of all time. He'll move down to 4 after Bob Huggins does pass him this year. One of 6 coaches to have 3 national championships of all time. He has more than his mentor, Dean Smith, has 2. As I mentioned, 3 titles in 14 years after 3 titles in 65 years, 9 Final Fours. Only head coach in college basketball history to have won 400 or more games at 2 schools, albeit Kansas and Carolina, the 2 best programs in college basketball, but you still got to win the games, and he won the games there at both places. He was in the ACC 18 years, won the regular season 9 times. And for the better part of his time, the ACC was the best conference in college basketball. He won it half of the time he was in there. His record against Coach K isn't great, 18-22 while at Carolina, but the program as a whole accomplished more than Duke's did. And he made a comment in his presser, Coach, as long as you beat Duke twice, that's all we want from you. Well, he beat Duke twice, 4 times, sweeping them 4 times, and he also got 3 national championships. So hopefully, let's remember that same sentiment because this last year, we beat Duke twice, including a blowout win in Chapel Hill, and you were still calling for his head. One thing that I think stuck out to me when he retired, as it with everybody, is how he echoed and believes he's no longer the right man for the job. Carolina may have found the right man to succeed him in Hubert Davis, and I'm excited for what Hubert Davis is going to do for Carolina basketball. That job is – no one will ever be more perfect for that job than Roy Williams was. As much as he always said that Dean Smith, Phil Ford, Michael Jordan were Carolina basketball, he's Carolina basketball. He is the definition of what that program embodies. That's what you should think about when you think of Carolina basketball. The first image you should think of is Roy Williams. Because, and I made this whole statement during the whole process of which only lasted 4 days in trying to find the right guy to replace him. You're not coaching a team. Other places you get paid to coach the team. Michigan State, some of those other jobs that are premier jobs. You're coaching the team. At Carolina, you're coaching a program and you are taking care of a family that goes back more than 60 years. Dean Smith may have been the godfather. Roy Williams was the caretaker. And no one took better care of family than him. No one cares about family more than him. No one is family more than him. And I'm so glad that Hubert Davis is allowing him to keep his office. I thought that was the first of many right moves he has made since being named the head coach at Carolina. You don't relegate Dean Smith to the basement, but that's what happened. You don't relegate Roy Williams to the basement, and that's not happening. And we can touch on fondest memories, favorite, big time things he did as a coach. And one thing we talked about was like best coaching jobs. And you look at the championship years, and those are probably easy because you won national championships in 2005, 2009, and 2017. I've always said for me, the most fun year I've had watching this team, this program, was 2016. Because you went through 2014, 2015, where you lost double-digit games back-to-back years. That doesn't happen here. And watching them lose that often as a young fan wasn't easy. It led to a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of anger, a lot of postseason cryings with early NCAA tournament runs falling short. So you get to 2016, and it was granted, preseason number 1, it was all supposed to come together. But then you lose a game in Northern Iowa, and people think, well, this team can't get the job done. They're not going to get the job done. And then you win the ACC 14-4. First time the league had moved to 18 regular season games. You win 14, which established or tied a new program record. You lost to Duke at home for Marcus Page and Bryce Johnson's final home game against Duke, where Joel Berry couldn't get a shot up and the ball gets blocked. But then you go to Cameron Indoor Stadium on their senior night, and you win a national champ, and you beat them. And I think that was, and you look at all the years they've won the national championship, they come after they beat Duke in big moments. 05 at home, 09 at home, 17 at home. I kind of thought in that moment, they're good enough to win a national championship. Then you win the ACC tournament, and I don't value winning that event as much as older Carolina fans do, because in my lifetime, that tournament's about NCAA tournament position seeding. In the 70s and 80s, you had to win it just to make the NCAA tournament. But they beat Virginia in Washington, D.C., a big-time win, and we thought right then and there, we're going to win the national championship. Then you get into the NCAA tournament, and you made rather quick work of every team you had to make quick work of to make the national title game against Villanova. Marcus Page hits still the most incredible shot in NCAA tournament history. There will never be another shot that will mimic what he did in terms of the degree of difficulty to tie the game. Chris Jenkins hits a shot, and it all evaporates. And in that moment, you're supposed to think, well, this wasn't supposed to be as fun. And it was the exact opposite. That was the thrill of a lifetime watching that team play. Roy Williams was coming off a knee replacement. He couldn't even walk. He literally...
Waddle and Roy.
He was like what Justin Pierce will be when Justin Pierce is 65 years old. And you could see that man living and dying with this team, with every game, with every possession, every missed free throw, every missed box out, every bad turnover. And that team had a lot of them too.
Yeah, remember, that was also probably the most fired up that we've ever seen him at a halftime meeting with one of the sideline reporters in the first game of that tournament against Florida Gulf Coast. They were losing at halftime, and he was livid as he was going over pretty much every aspect of the game that Carolina was just not living up to. I mean, look, I think it's probably cliche to say, I think 17 was probably his best coaching job, because you look at how much pressure was on them to come back and win the national championship, with the fact that you had lost your senior point guard, one of the best players to ever play for you in program history, one of the emotional leaders of the team as well, and Bryce Johnson, a fan favorite, another emotional leader for you. You had to replace both of those guys. You had a guy in Kennedy Meeks who, to that point in his career, I mean, I'm not going to say he had underperformed, but I think there were some pretty big expectations for him, and he just hadn't quite reached them at that time. But you saw this team step up, and they just looked like a team that was destined, but Roy Williams put them in the spots that they needed to. There was a game against Arkansas in the round of 32 that they easily could have lost. And to be honest with you, no one would have blamed them. That was an Arkansas team that was built similarly to the one that we see now. But under Mike Anderson, I mean, we thought the pace that they play under Eric Musselman was fast. Under Mike Anderson, they played 1,000 miles an hour. That was the way. I mean, it was up and down the court. So we knew coming into that game that there was going to be trouble. But Roy Williams found a way to get his guys to calm down and do exactly what they had to do to get out of that game and move on. And, I mean, you can't give him enough credit for what he did in that title game.
They were down 65-60 under 4-minute timeout.
Yeah.
And they
against Arkansas.
And they finished the game on a 12-0 run. And in that huddle, and that game was very similar like in 2009 when they came back against LSU against Greensboro. Or in Greensboro. He told that senior-related team, you want your season to go home, keep playing like this. Well, in that moment, he told his team, we haven't won a game like this all year long, and let's do it now. And they did it.